And welcome back to Speak Up Las Cruces with Walt Rubel and myself, Peter Goodman, co-hosting today. And for this half hour, really 40 minutes, we're going to be talking with Sarah Smith and Lorraine Lowther about their efforts to change the situation as to what they consider inappropriate books in Las Cruces Public School, high school libraries. Did I say that fairly?
Yeah, although it's really all schools,
okay.
Elementary, middle school, and high school.
Okay. And should note we don't have anybody from the schools here, unlike a lot of situations where, we're neutral moderators. I don't feel neutral about this. I disagree. But give us, quickly, kind of summary fashion, your explanation of what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having this discussion. This topic has become extremely politicized, and I think that that's unfortunate because it obscures really what's going on here. And the overall issue is that there are quite a number of books that are in Las Cruces Public School libraries and libraries across the country that contain content that, if they were rated like movies, would be rated R, NC-17, or even XXX. And most parents don't realize that that content is in the schools. So I think that something needs to change as far as parents having more awareness of it, as well as the district taking more responsibility for the issue.
Well, let me question you on what you just said. You say it's become very politicized. One of the things people say about what you're doing is that it's politically based, that it's primarily a conservative group that goes to city council meetings and I think county meetings and school board meetings and is going to run candidates and is trying to raise an issue. That's not so. And you, for example, I don't know about Lorraine, but you have kids who'll be homeschooled. Why are you on such a mission about this?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that what's happening in the schools is of concern to everybody in the community, whether you have kids in school or not. Mm-hmm. And I think that this issue, when I take it to parents, whether they are Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever, there's generally shock. They don't expect this kind of content, and that's why I say that this issue has become politicized when I don't think it really is a political issue. It's more of just an issue about, what's appropriate age-wise for kids. Just like, rating a movie as rated R, mm-hmm. There's nothing political about that. It's just about the content.
So, Lorraine, go ahead and jump in if you wanted to.
I just wanted to point in that I have 3 kids, 3 under 10. And my goal with this was to raise awareness with the parents of what's in the schools. We use a lot of guidance, like Sarah said, for movies and even Netflix or Disney, what things are rated to know if things are appropriate for kids. And we're busy, so that's kind of what we have to use to help. Our goal is to protect them.
Were you also advocating it at Albuquerque recently?
Yes, sir.
So it's not just your kids.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, if the idea is you can only protest if your kids, that would mean that I would have to shut up and not have anything to say about it, and I don't think that's fair.
I agree with what Sarah said. It's a community-wide thing. I feel like it's the community's goal to protect our kids.
Yeah.
And I think there's certain topics that some kids aren't mature enough to handle yet.
For people who aren't aware, and I'm not real aware, there is a system. I mean, there is a system for reviewing books and for determining which books are appropriate for which age. Can you talk a little bit about how that system works and why you think it is letting books through that you think should not get through?
Well, I don't think there is a system in the way that you are describing it. Right now, the way that the books end up in the school libraries largely has to do with whether they're on a list from the School Library Journal or the American Library Association. And what we've been finding out with this issue is that oftentimes the librarians actually don't even know what's in these books. And so they're picking books off of a list, and I don't feel like there is an adequate review happening here in Las Cruces to ensure that the books that they are picking are appropriate, because they're relying on those outside experts.
And nobody in the district is actually reading the book?
I'll give an example. I mean, the Jack of Hearts book, which is one we talked about a lot about 2 years ago, when we met with the school principal and the school librarian, they said they had never even looked at the book until we brought it up. I mean, it was literally picked off the list and then placed on the shelf. And so that's one of the things that I think could change, is for them to take more responsibility to actually assess those.
You tried to basically ban that one, get it removed. And it's interesting because I know that you've criticized the school board for its selection of, it went to a review board of teachers. My understanding from some of those teachers is basically their first reaction was very much like yours. And then when they heard the presentation by whatever the group is that looks at that sort of thing and looks how they affect children, that they say, okay, I guess there's a good reason for this book that is otherwise unappetizing to be on our high school shelves.
Well, what is that reason? Why? So if your first reaction is, gee, this is inappropriate, and then somebody convinces you that it's not, well, I'm curious. Why? Okay. If I thought it was inappropriate before, what did they tell me that made me change my mind?
I think in that particular case, it had to do with being gay and discovering you're gay when you're a kid, and some reassurance. Part of this, I was going to give you an example because I wanted to, when you first gave me this booklet of 95 plus explicit, the first page I turned to was a book called Forever by Judy Blume, and it clearly has things in here that a lot of folks might not want their kids to read, such as page 29. She's saying, actually a friend is saying to her, I've been thinking that it might not be a bad idea to get laid before college, and she makes the point that it's not good the first time anyway, so just get it out of the way. Which are ideas that you may or may not agree with. And then there's on page 50, we lay down on our rug, and after a while, when Michael reached under my skirt, I didn't stop him. Not then, and not when his hand was inside my underpants. I want you so much, he said. I want you too, I told him. But I can't. I'm not ready, Michael. Yes, you are. You are. I can feel how ready you are. No. I pushed his hand away and sat up. I'm talking about mentally ready. And I guess my question, kids are going to see, I think you'd agree, all kids are going to see all they want of sex and misbehavior of every kind on the internet or in movies or wherever it may be. Here's something that's trying to take that and realistically say, put the brakes on and say, think about who you are and, what the impact of this is. I'm thinking, wow, if I had a daughter of that kind of age, boy, I'd want her to read that and stop and think about things, because she's going to get all the stuff from the surrounding culture and from the internet about trying to be showy in a sexual way and do whatever she feels like. So
I'm glad you brought up this book, Peter.
Big deal?
So part of the reason that this particular book is included in the compilation that we made, and for those who don't know, we have a book list with excerpts so that parents can see. Part of the reason this one was included is because it's in elementary schools. And you're not reading the passage where the character is actually having sex and going through the entire act. And in elementary school, a lot of parents are going to think this isn't appropriate because it's teaching kids about kids having sex with kids, and they don't feel like they're age appropriate at that age. So, there are different books in here which the line should be different for an elementary school than a middle school than a high school. I would assume everybody would agree on that. And so
I'm not
some
sure
of the
I
books
would.
Really?
Well, so, why don't you look at Court of Silver Flames here and tell me if you think that that one should be in an elementary school.
Well,
because it's an adult erotic fiction book. Literally, that's how it is sold.
Do you have children?
Yes and no. I mean, I have two adult children. I was not let's say there were casual relationships that were over by the time I heard there was a child involved, and I have relationships with those kids, but I was not involved day to day in bringing them up.
And once again, that doesn't mean that he doesn't get to have an opinion.
Oh, no, not saying that. I
No,
was just
no,
curious as far as
I mean, I just
parent being protection.
this idea that only a certain group gets to speak on. No,
Well,
everybody gets to have their say.
Yeah, if I did have children, and I mean, there are children that friends have had who I was like a favorite uncle and that kind of thing, and I care about children, and I guess one of the things that bothers me about this, other than the fact that it's sort of one group trying to not ban books exactly, but limit books people can read, for other groups. I look at our surrounding society, and I'm appalled by, first of all,
Go ahead and finish your point.
First of all, as a kid, what screwed me up most was watching TV and seeing the Noxema girl. If you want to sell shaving cream or whatever it is, you get a girl with big breasts and low cut and blonde, usually. Not those days it wasn't anybody black or Hispanic. And that's how you sell things. The only women who count are the ones that look certain ways. And then we look at now, and we have basically a guy who feels up women without their consent and does other things, and supposedly even raped a wife, according to court documents. And he's in a position where he's somebody people look up to, and a kind of a role model. Doesn't that worry you more in terms of how that's going to affect your kid than a book in a library that they'll probably never know about?
So there are a lot of things that are concerning with kids, and it is a community. I feel like it is a community action that has to happen in order to help protect our kids. And it's a shame that there are those kind of commercials, and we can't do anything about all those kinds of things, and we're trying to do something about what we can. And at this point, it's informing parents what books are in the libraries and that they do have the right to opt out.
I think we have a caller. Good morning.
Good morning, Peter. This is Pamela Court. I'm the president of the Las Cruces Public School Board. How are you this morning?
I'm fine. How are you, Ms. Court?
Doing well. Thank you. Thank you.
And
good morning to everybody in the studio.
Good morning.
Jump right in.
Well, thank you. I just have been listening to the conversation and appreciate having this conversation on air, but I just want to make sure that everybody knows that parents can opt out of any curriculum material that they don't agree with and any library book that they don't want their kids to look at. It's a simple and easy process to do. And part of the policy of Las Cruces Public Schools is that no parent gets to decide what the rest of the parents need for their kids. If a parent decides, I don't want my kids reading The Court of Silver Thorns because that was just brought up, then they can let the school know. The school lets the librarian know. It is tagged in the computer, and if the kid comes in and tries to check out that book, they cannot. And so parent choice is, I think, really what we're talking about, and Las Cruces Public Schools gives parents choice all the time.
So parents can opt out.
Let's give one of our guests an opportunity to respond if you'd like.
Yeah, so, and I appreciate that, Madam Court, and I appreciate that Las Cruces does have that policy. One of the things that's in the booklet we have is instructions for how parents can access that process. However, most parents don't anticipate this type of content, and one of the things that I had hoped Las Cruces Public Schools would do was to find a way for parents to know what kind of content is there so that they can potentially make those decisions, and that is something that didn't happen. So I think that it's a little bit disingenuous to me to tell parents or to say, well, they could have just opted out, because most parents would never anticipate a book that is sold as adult erotic fiction to be potentially available to middle schoolers. And they don't, your school library catalog is very difficult to find this kind of thing. It's not like they can even get on there and identify the books in that way. So I don't feel like the tools are there for the parents to actually know which books they would want to opt out of. And additionally, the children in the library can look at the books, obviously, before they would ever check them out. So it's not as if the opt-out is any sort of guarantee that they haven't been exposed to content that's not appropriate for them.
Right, but what I hear you saying is that this is content that you feel that kids should not be subjected to, but I'm wondering how you can make that choice, for example, for my children.
Well, there should
so
be.
If you make that choice, go ahead.
There should be community standards, though, shouldn't there? And doesn't the school board have some responsibility towards that?
Well, so it's not directly under the school board. We do have multiple policies which call for parent involvement and for knowledge of what's happening in the school. I think that you're hard pressed to find a parent that doesn't know what's happening in the child's classroom, and we are not offering all the books that are in the library as part of the regular curriculum. And you can access regular curriculum, the syllabus and all of those things through the teacher, online, and all of those things. And so I think what we're talking about, at least here for me, is a matter of choice. And if students choose to read books because they may be feeling things in their life that they can't explain or talk about with other people, and for me, books open those doors so that they can find maybe people with shared experiences, maybe just some questions that they have in their own way and in their own time.
Okay. Well, we appreciate the call. They're very important points. Before you wrap up, anything else you'd like to say?
No, that if parents need the names of the policies where they can find all of the options and where they know what their rights are, they certainly I can send that to you, and you can have that for everyone. And that just the importance of choice in a library. We aren't throwing the books at the kids when they walk in the door. These are books that they seek out to read, and they seek out to read for different reasons. And hallelujah, they're reading books. Mm-hmm. That's fabulous.
Yeah. No, we all agree on that. But that kind of sidesteps the issue, I think. But thank you for your participation, your contribution. Thank you very much.
I also got to say, over time, ignorance of the realities of sex have probably caused more problems in marriages and people's lives than knowing too much. I think we have a second caller. Good morning. Are you there?
Caller, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, maybe. Yes.
Okay. So my first comment is, how can we blame? It sounds a little bit like I'm hearing blame for the library relying on others' expertise when the conversation started out talking about we're relying on movie ratings and Disney. I mean, we're always relying on other people somewhat, and that's a good thing, but we can't rely on them completely because they're going to have different opinions. So Disney might say this movie is fine for your kids. You may feel differently. Do you try to change Disney, the rating system? No, you realize that, okay, I'm not going to completely agree with Disney. So the library's doing the same things. They're relying on other people that they feel like are trustworthy. My guess is that these groups are generally trustworthy, and maybe sometimes you disagree with their choice. Fine. It's going to happen to all of us in every aspect of our life. That's just the way it is. So I guess what I wanted to say is, as a young person, I read forever when I was in 5th grade. I remember it very well. I was, 9, 10 years old. It was a very meaningful book. I was not sexually active until college, unlike my friends and my sister who were sexually active very early. Never read I am a library hound. I love books. I just think that making this a problem is looking for a problem that doesn't exist. I understand being frustrated with things you can't control, but banning books because you think they're going to somehow make someone into a drug addict or sex crazed, I just don't think it's going to happen. I've never heard of it happening. It didn't happen to me. I just... I feel for you wanting to control your kids' lives, but I just don't think this is the way to do it.
That sparks a question. Let me ask Lorraine first. What experience have your kids have, or your nieces or nephews or neighbors, where a book like this has really harmed them?
So I wouldn't say it was a book that harmed them, but there was a presentation in the Las Cruces Public Schools that I don't think was appropriate for their age group that harmed my daughter. She came home crying because of a presentation of, that they had a third party come in and do during their counseling class, and they just felt uncomfortable. So what this became for me was just letting parents know that there are things that they can be exposed to at the schools, and if you have the opportunity and you want to, you should opt out. And here's a reference of those things that are available, and if you so choose, here's the policy to do so.
And just to tell the policy, since Madam Court mentioned it, for parents who want to know, it is IJL, and there's a form that they can fill out for that. Now, I want to be clear, we are not trying to, quote, ban books. I think that's a little bit of a twisting of the words. What we are asking the district to do is to create their own policy. I'm not saying that I should be the one. Lorraine's not saying she should be the one. We want the district to create their own policy that feels common sense, that has some general guidelines for what would be allowed in elementary, and maybe they decide forever is okay. And that's fine. But I think that it's disingenuous to say that trying to ask the schools to make sure materials are age appropriate is banning. We would not allow Hustler in a school for obvious reasons, right? Hustler magazine. Generally, most people would say that shouldn't probably be provided by taxpayer dollars to students in a school without their parents knowing about it. It's not banning to say you don't have it there. It's just saying, is it appropriate for the age, and what is appropriate? And I hope that they will actually make their own lines in the sand on that. And
you do recognize that the experts, the library people that they get these books from, National Library, whatever it is, seem to think the books are, have redeeming values for the kids.
Yes, they do. The thing is, books aren't rated the way that movies and other things are. And so when you look at a movie, for instance, and you're deciding if it's age appropriate, you're looking at the content of it in terms of language, in terms of sex content, violence, not whether it has some redeeming educational value. And so there are some things that, even if there is redeeming educational value, are still not going to be age appropriate because of the other content.
I guess we lost our caller. I'm a little surprised. I thought there was a process for local review, and now you're telling me that there's not, that they just, if somebody in another state somewhere working on a library board says it's okay, that we decide
I think
that
the
it's
local
okay.
librarian makes the decision.
Oh, okay.
Yes, the librarian makes the decision, but in many cases they haven't actually read the book. They are picking them off of a list.
Yeah, so how can you make...
we talked about the Judy Blume book. I gather she's famous. I looked into that. But clearly that's, it may have things you don't want your kid to know about, which I guess if I were, your brother-in-law at the Thanksgiving dinner, I'd have questions about the whole thing about censoring what kids read. Never works. Anyway.
Well, that gets back to her example of Hustler. I mean, obviously we have to have some censorship. We can't just have everything in the library, in the school library.
And then some of the books in the reference guide aren't just for reading material, too. There's several graphic novels that is minimal reading.
I wish
Oh,
we had.
I agree. Those are not things I'd want to read. Or
I mean, there are books with extremely graphic pictures of sex acts and things like that in the schools. And, there's a difference between sex education and I think that.
Well, and the school lets those are not. They're not presented to your kids. I understand you had a problem with some presentation we don't know the details of, but these books are in the library where kids can find them, and I just think that's fine. But I have a question for you. We were looking at the Judy Blume book, which had some redeeming values, I think, in that it had kids talking about sex. I don't think you get kids reading it unless you treat it realistically, and that's going to mean some bad language and acts that maybe you wouldn't want your kids doing at this age. Why isn't the Bible on this list? I mean, you smile.
It's a good.
But,
the reason I smiled is because people bring it up a lot.
Yeah.
And the reason is, I would really like you to look side by side. We're not saying that mentioning sex is not okay. It's about the graphic nature. And to be clear, the Judy and Blume book that you were reading from is probably the most mild of all these 95 books. If you look, for instance, at Court of Silver Flames, again, it's adult erotic fiction. That's how it is sold. That's where it is classified in the public library. It's not in the YA section. It's in the adult section. So if you compare those passages to Bible passages, you're going to see a dramatic difference because one of them is just mentioning sex happened, and the other one is telling what it feels like, what it smells like, how it...
Putting your daughters out as prostitutes.
Yeah, but there's not a graphic description of the act.
Right, they're not. And
True.
there are books here describing children being prostituted, including details of those sex acts while they are being raped. There's passages about an infant having full penetration rape by their father. So there's a big difference there.
We have another
phone call. So we're...
Good morning.
Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. Is this for me?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. So this is Patrick Nolan, Vice President with the school board. There's a lot to talk about on this issue, and I've probably said it all. There's a few points that I think I just want to get out there into the world. 23 of these books deal with what they identify as alternate sexualities. That's like LGBTQ themed books. So almost a quarter of these books that they think don't belong in libraries are books for LGBTQ youth. So let that sink in. We have very few parents opting out. I don't know that we've had a single one, and I'm actually trying to verify that. So no, this is not what we are hearing from parents in our schools. They are not calling us and talking to us about books. This is not the problem at all. And I think there's one part that I really want to drive home. This book is Gay by Juno Dawson. This is a book that is at Las Cruces High, says it's lost in Mayfield. So here is page 5 of what they identify as explicit passage. So if you are new to the club, you're lucky because you're being L or G or B or T or asterisk. It's super fun. You're free now, and you don't have to hide. Whatever your identity, as by the end of this book, you'll see that far from being alone, you're joining a vast collective of cool, happy, inspirational people, each with a story to tell. I would love to hear why this is an explicit passage.
I'm really glad you brought this up, Mr. Nolan, because the reason that we included books on this list doesn't have to do whether they have gay characters or not. There are hundreds of other books in the school libraries that don't have explicit content that are not on this list because they don't have age-inappropriate content. So,
Sarah, you're not answering the question. Why is that explicit?
I didn't say that every single passage in this book is explicit. And
it says explicit passages.
We cannot actually read the explicit content of these books on the air because it breaks FCC guidelines.
All right, but I think just a point of fact. I think I don't have the book open, but when I look at that, it has a section where it says explicit passages, and then it gives some examples. I read a couple from the Forever book before. And so you are, or whoever put out the booklet, is saying this is explicit. So his question is not the overall issue, but, okay, why do you call that explicit?
It's a good question. You know, I think that it's possible. So let's talk about this
Oh,
booklet.
so you didn't actually read or produce this material?
Yes,
I'm
did.
Sorry, this is misinformation.
No,
And,
we did,
Walt,
and
you
Lorraine is
really
one of the
need to stop
volunteers
platforming
here.
these people.
Lorraine, who is here, is also one of the volunteers. We did read these books. We did actually put this together. It took dozens and dozens of hours to pull this information together. I think it's possible for this book, the word explicit on the page maybe isn't the best word. We should have used some other word. That's
Good in
possible.
hindsight. That sounds like a dodge to me. This is a ridiculous notion. This conversation that we are having.
I would love you to
It is
read
tasty.
passages from some of the other books. The ones who are
They don't
saying,
matter.
"Oh, my trusty razor
Why don't
blade."
they matter? Why don't they matter?
They don't matter because they are saying right here in this book that to say you're
Right.
LGBT or Q is explicit. That is all that this community needs to know about the people that are behind this effort.
Okay,
And that is it.
gotcha. I want to.
And I've said my piece, so I will let
Thank
you
you,
guys have
Patrick.
this show.
I
Walt,
wanna-
I love being on. I really think you need to think about platforming these people anymore. I really think you need to think about that. So thank you, everybody.
Okay. I agree with a lot of what Patrick said. I do not agree with the idea that by inviting people we disagree with who have different opinions, we're platforming them.
And I don't agree.
By the way, a school board member ought to realize platform is, last time I looked, a noun and not a verb. I guess it's trendy among
And I don't agree that
officials.
picking one weak example, which he did, that was a weak example, disproves everything that you're trying to say. I don't.
Let me
agree
ask
with
you
that.
one basic question. I mean, you all teach your kids and you try to bring them up. Why are you so what is it that what's the harm you're so afraid is going to be done to them by exposure to these? You think, I mean,
Well, parents instinctively know that there's certain content that's not okay for kids. You know, a porn movie obviously is not going to be okay for a 5-year-old, right? Now, there are studies that also show
if
it.
porn movies are all over the internet,
I don't think that that's
maybe a book like Forever where they talk about it and, try to
Most engaged
reason.
parents are going to try to protect their kids from the porn that's on the internet. And so,
The goal is not to have that to happen.
right, especially when they're really little, the parents are going to try to keep that from happening, and then they would be shocked to realize, oh, the school might be providing content that goes against what I'm already trying to protect my kids from. And so, as I mentioned before, we were really trying to get the district to let the parents know where that content is so they can try to opt out. And Patrick Nolan actually just proved my point. Parents don't know this content is there.
And so we're glad that you're having the discussion so that we can let parents know that it's there. And if they don't want their kids to know, then they can opt out.
Right, and the school allows that. I don't see the point in the school going out and telling people we have books here that other people don't like. How would you explain? You make the valid point that the Bible is not as explicit, but it does have and seem to approve in some cases what we would call child abuse and putting daughters out as prostitutes for angry men out there. Various. If I were the parent, if I were an atheist or Islamic, and I were trying to explain to my kid why you're having a book in there that tells that kind of story and seems to approve it, and seems to claim some authority, how would you explain that? Or let me put it a little differently. How would you feel if a group were now trying to ban the Bible from being in the library at school?
To be clear, I'm not even Christian. So
Yeah.
the question that people bring up with the Bible, I think, is making an assumption that we're trying to push a Christian worldview on the schools, and that's not what is actually happening.
You're trying to,
but
you are
I
trying,
do think that
you're
students
trying
need to know that those acts exist we're not trying to prevent students from knowing that rape ever happens, but
Good.
there are studies showing that there are harms when kids read these books. So I can tell you, for instance, one study found sexually explicit media exposure in early adolescence, including books, is strongly related to early sexual debut, unsafe sex, and multiple sexual partners, increasing the risk of teen pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases. Kids, when they're exposed to sexually explicit and violent media, are more likely to be involved in dating violence and sexual violence.
So how does the Judy Blume book, where you're talking about that, or there's another one I was going to read where this, I haven't read the book, but this child is apparently asleep, and I don't know what, I didn't know what was going on, and then I realized somebody was touching me, and it was Uncle Jerry touching me in places I didn't even know I had, and I wanted him to stop, but I didn't know how to say anything. That's a pretty common situation, as I understand it, from cases where children have been molested, legal cases, and counseling cases that I've been related to. Here somebody's trying to put it in perspective for a kid, help a kid be armed to deal with that if it happens. How does that accentuate? I mean, you're reading a study. I haven't read that study. It's a general conclusion, and I don't think would surprise anybody. But with all that stuff out there, explicit, sex, rape, whatever, on the internet and in movies, how does something like the Judy Blume book or that other one I was just talking about, you think that's going to harm the kid?
I think that parents of children who are 5 years old need to know that that book is available to their kids, because it does have a very graphic description of children having sex. And so I think that parents need to know that that's there and have the option to decide if it's okay for their kids.
So when I was going to school, our computers had parameters on the internet that you couldn't go to certain websites. And I feel like this is similar. Like, there's certain books that you shouldn't have access to when you're young and you're learning. And if you want it, there are other places to get that information. But in a publicly funded place, I feel like there should be some oversight.
Others might feel different, so that, while you notifying other people of what the books are may be fine, trying to make them unavailable as opposed to people being able to opt out, that you're kind of making a determination for a lot more people, and you wouldn't like it if somebody who disagreed with you was doing that.
Let me ask you this. Is it asking too much for the school district to read the book first? Because I don't think it is.
No, I don't know. We should have had the librarian on.
Well, we had two board members.
I don't think
that's what I'm
the
hearing,
librarian
is that they are putting books on the shelf without reading them and without knowing what's in them. And I don't think it's too much to ask to say, read the book first.
School board members have to read all the books?
No, the librarian. Somebody at the school district has to read the book first.
Fine with me. I think the librarian does, but or at least look through it. But
Well, the last one that Sarah had up for review, they had said that they hadn't read the book before.
And like I said, I thought there was a committee that reviewed books, and now I'm learning that there isn't.
Other people, I think, sorry I scheduled this for only 40 minutes, a little extra, and not the full hour. But we can talk about this further. We've been talking with Sarah Smith and Lorraine Lowther about their campaign to inform parents about books that they don't think should be available in school libraries.